You're listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts, Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole Gallicchio-elz, COO. We are here to provide you with a vital lifeline to executive advice that you've never heard before. We have the resources and the tactics to help you reach the next level. Whether you are just starting out or you've been in business for decades, listen in for exclusive tips and content to meet your needs. Welcome back to another episode of Not Your Average CEO Lifeline. Today we are doing Insider Talk franchise opportunities with Bob Bernotas. Thank you, Bob. I am eager to hear more about what you have to say regarding franchisees and finding that right fit. So can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself so they know who you are?
Oh, sure. I've been in I'm a dinosaur in the industry. I've been in franchise, Lord, I hate to admit at this point, but since 1986. I broke into franchising way back when, excuse me, with a company called West Coast Video. If anybody remembers the video rental days, and I had a bunch of those in the Philadelphia area, then lost my mind and went up to New York with them as well. But I've owned several different franchise concepts and multiple units with each. I was also CEO of a national chain, and I've been consulting for a couple of decades, originally consulting on the side of franchisors, helping them position for growth. But over the last 10, 12 years or so, I migrated entirely over to the franchisee side, and I help prospective franchisees find the right franchise fit.
Sounds like quite the career, but it sounds like your advice is going to be ideal for our audience. Our listeners typically are starting out. They're typically entrepreneurs. So can you tell our audience who are thinking about open a franchise, what's your initial advice that you have for them?
Well, I mean, if you're focusing on franchise, there's really two directions you can go. You can do resales, purchase one that's already existing, or you can purchase a new startup franchise. Now, when I say startup franchise, the concept already exists. They already affected the model. But so there's two different choices to go from that perspective. I don't typically recommend resales. Usually you're going to pay considerably more for that, because if someone's selling, they want to get top dollar, unless it's a distressed situation, and then you may not want to own that particular franchise. So that's number one. My advice always is to focus on new ones, but make sure you're getting a good territory or good location. And then the second piece of advice I'd give is to work with somebody that knows what they're doing. I mean, if you go online and just start searching for franchises, you're going to see what these companies want you to see. And I will also tell you, the better companies don't bother advertising online. When you search online, you're landing on portals. 95% of the people coming to these franchise companies through portals end up not being qualified, so they waste a lot of time. Plus, again, you're not seeing what's behind the curtain and all of the secret sauce and whatnot, and what you could potentially make with that franchise. So if you know someone who has been in the franchise industry, who could be a mentor or advisor to you, I'd strongly recommend having a conversation with that individual.
How do you know what territory or location that you should be considering?
Great question. Really depends upon the model, the type of
Course.
franchise it is, because some you just need a different demographic than another. I mean, for instance, I just bought a franchise concept, and I put together a small investment group to do it. I will not be involved in operations at all. But we bought the developmental rights to 6 units with this concept. And what was important to me was household income, number one, and then males 30 plus as a demographic. So really, depending upon the type of franchise you're going into, will determine what the demographic profile should potentially look like.
That's great advice, Bob. Thank you. I know you talk about in your work the perfect franchise fit. So can you talk a little bit about that to our audience and how you find that?
Well, I mean, in my case, I will work with a candidate or a client to take them through a structured process hopefully find the right franchise. And that process typically starts with my confidential questionnaire. It'll take them 20 to 30 minutes to complete. Once that's completed, I've had a chance to digest it. We schedule a consultation. A consultation typically takes about an hour. On that call, we'll review the confidential questionnaire together. I'll have lots of questions for them. I may float some trial balloons about different categories of franchising. I'll answer any questions they have. We talk often about financing, how I can help them there, depending upon their financial situation, where they stand. We try to put a price tag. What investment level are you comfortable with? And once we get past that stage, and I really have gotten to know them, then I go to work behind the scenes and I start to develop a list of franchises that I think will be a good fit for them. And I may start out with literally 100 different franchises. I do my territory checks. Usually that will cut the list in half, depending upon the market that they're in, because half may be sold. I continue to whittle the list down further. So by the time we move on to the next step, the brand review call, I usually have it down to about a half dozen franchises that I think will be really good fits for them. We can always come back to the others and still look at more, but I don't want to overwhelm them by showing them too many at once. So on the brand review call, prior to the call, that call lasts about an hour and 15 minutes on average. And prior to the call, I'll send them the list of the franchises we're going to review. On that call, I'll introduce those franchises to them. We'll discuss them. I'll answer any questions they have about them, and I will and I'll give them my opinion on each of those franchises. And then I ask them to let's try to identify 2, maybe 3 of that grouping of franchises that we take a deeper dive into, and then I explain to them how we go about doing that. But I also work with candidates all the time on financing. I work with the top financing sources nationally that do franchise financing, so I can help them with that aspect of it as well. So just as an example, if someone comes to me, and there's a spectrum of people that I work with. Some people they're looking for a passion play. They love their pets, so they want to be in something pet related. They love food, so they want to be in something food related. Then on the other end of the spectrum, I have clients who are just, I call them my show me the money clients. They're interested in ROI, earnings. They don't care what the widget is, as long as it's something that's ethical and provides valued service to the community. And 9 times out of 10, they're looking for something that's semi-passive, that they can put 10 to 20 hours a week in and not walk away from their full-time job. So if a client gives me the direction, hey, Bob, that's the bucket that I fall into, just show me the top financial opportunities in franchising, then that's exactly the direction that I will take them. Hope that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
Does make sense.
Okay.
I have one though for our listeners who are unsure, right? Is this for me? What would you say to those listeners that are like, I'm not sure if I want to start my own business or go with a franchise? How are they going to know that this may be for them?
Yeah, that's always the $1 million question. And for some people, it's not going to be. I mean, I always tell a client starting in this process, look, we may get halfway through this process and you may say, Bob, I don't think franchising's right for me. And that's perfectly fine. We exit the process at that point. I'd rather know sooner than later. We may get halfway through the process and I may say to my candidate, hey, I'm not sure
this isn't for me.
Right. But if things are clicking, now I will tell you that the vast majority of the time it is for someone. If they have the financial capability to execute upon the model, there's no reason why most people shouldn't potentially own a franchise. I mean, the franchise, it's not like starting an independent business from scratch. You have a template, you have a proven success model, you have lots of support tools. Many of these companies have evolved to offer an incredible support platform if you know which ones to potentially look for. So if the number one reason why most people don't move forward with a franchise, it's simply fear. They are afraid, they're afraid to step out of their comfort zone. So when I run into that situation, it's often, look, stay in your job. There's plenty of semi-passive, part-time franchises that you can get into. So you don't cut that lifeline with your job. You can start building income on the side. You have to trade some of your time for that, but it doesn't have to be full-time. But then once you get it to a point and you're comfortable with it, and you feel, okay, this can surpass or meet or surpass my job income, then it's up to you if you want to continue to operate that way, or you want to step away from your job and then scale your business into something larger. That's always a possibility as well.
As an executive, we know that it can be difficult to manage your work-life balance, find time to tackle all the items on that to-do list, or determine next steps to bring your business to the next level. Virtual Assist USA is your solution. Whether you need someone to help you with those daily tasks, or you would like to speak to someone about strategies for the next steps for your business, we are here to help. Find us today at www.virtualassistusa.com to find out what else we can do for you.
That's perfect advice.
Yeah, that's really great advice, Bob. And something I think that our listeners would really like to know is, as a franchise investor, what secrets do you have that you would share with the audience that would be good advice for them?
Great question. Difficult question, because it really depends upon the type of franchise investor it is. Excuse me. So I work with a lot of candidates who also are real estate investors, and usually they're pretty savvy people, and they have a good deal of capital and so forth. And what I always find interesting is what their approach is in real estate. And in most cases in real estate, they're in it for the long game, because usually with real estate, unless you're doing larger multi-unit properties, your cash flow is not unless you're going to pay cash up front, which very few people do when they buy these properties. But if you're going to do, let's say, a duplex, or you're going to have a few, single family homes that you own, usually your cash flow is you're making a little bit of money, you're breaking even, or you're losing money. And most people, if they're serious about real estate, they hire a management company, because otherwise it'll become a full-time job. So I always find it interesting when we get into a discussion about franchising versus real estate investing. What I have come to believe is that franchise investing is infinitely more lucrative if you do it right and you minimize your risk. And the reason I say that is two reasons. One, your cash flow is going to be significantly stronger. Yes, you're going to trade some of your time as opposed to more passive investment if you have a management company running your real estate assets. But if you get a franchise up and running, and you have really positive cash flow, and it could be significant income. It could be life-changing income. It could be income that surpasses your job income, and you're doing it on a part-time basis. But you're also building equity in that franchise. What I mean by that is typically what you will see, and there's plenty of data out there, somewhere between a 2.5 to 5 multiple of earnings you can sell a profitable franchise for. So if you open a franchise, you have positive cash flow for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it happens to be, and then you decide at the end of that period of time, I want to sell my franchise. Just as a pure example, if that franchise is throwing off $2 million in top line and dropping 25% to the bottom line, you're looking at $500,000 per year coming to the bottom line. What's that franchise worth? And typically I would suggest to you it's worth somewhere between a 3 to 5 multiple of EBITDA, of earnings. So you're looking at a $1.5 to $2.5 million exit strategy with a franchise like that you may have paid $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for. So it really depends upon what you want to get into. But if you want to focus on the best financial opportunities in franchising, there's real strong opportunity to have some exit strategy and cash out with a big check at the end.
It's really interesting, Bob. I don't think a lot of our listeners, if they were looking to invest, would necessarily say, I'm going to choose a franchise over real estate opportunity. I think that the talk is always, oh, I'll just, buy a piece of property and it'll make me money someday and it's easy, right? I
Sure.
don't think that they think that they have to maintain it. And you took quite the perspective on that. So I appreciate that you filled our listeners in if they're, listening, looking to invest, whether operating a franchise or owning a franchise versus real estate, which is the way to go for them. So
Yeah.
thank you for that insight.
Sure. And to your point, Nicole, I mean, if you bought a piece of real estate before COVID and you had that run up, it's an equity play. You're making
Oh, yeah,
money
of
on the
course.
equity that you build, but typically real estate, it doesn't have a run up like that in normal times. So usually real estate is a 15, 20-year play for most of my clients.
That's great, Bob. And then I really just have one last question. Because you've been a business owner, we talked about since the mid 80s, what is the hardest struggle that you have today that you experience?
Well, I mean, I think this is pretty much universal. It's labor. These days, at least, it's labor. Ever since COVID, labor has become more difficult. There's certain types of concepts that I attempt to avoid, and most of those would be food related concepts or any brick and mortar retail concept that has minimum wage, high turnover employee labor. That can be really, really difficult. So there's so many models out there that you can get into in franchising that don't necessarily involve brick and mortar retail. And it could operate out of an office, in some cases out of your home, in some cases out of maybe some flex space. That don't require a lot of personnel. And so if there's one issue, it's labor. Another issue, I would avoid anything these days that's product based. Those franchises, if you do searches, they're going away in droves simply because you don't want to compete against Amazon. I always counsel my candidates, and not the brands that I typically will show, whether the candidate says this is the direction they want to go in or not, are brands that tend to be pandemic resistant. They're not going to be affected if another pandemic hits. Brands that are Amazon proof, they're not going to be affected by Amazon. But most importantly, brands that are economy recession resistant, that aren't going to be impacted in a large way. In some cases, not impacted at all by recession. And I think going into it with that mindset is critical when you're considering a franchise, and things that are evergreen, that are not going to go away, because there's so many things that are faddish, they're here today. I mean, people love crumble cookie, right? Real popular concept. That scares the heck out of me. And it costs, most people think, it's a couple $100,000. That's $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 to open one of those. There's so many better places you could put your investment into franchising. You're going to get a much better return on investment.
Fascinating. Really, really insightful, Bob. Can you, lastly, for our audience that is thinking, this may be for me and I want to hear more, about this, can you tell our audience where they can find more about you?
Sure. Go to my website. It's franchisewithbob.com. Pretty simple.
Very simple.
And you can reach out to me through the website. You can also download my free ebook if you like, and I'll be happy to set up an initial call, 20-minute call, and we can have a chat and see if it makes sense for us to work together.
Thank you so much, Bob. I know that we can talk quite some time on this topic. We may have to have you on season 3 if you're interested to dive in a little deeper to this topic.
Sure, it'd be my pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful hearing from you.
Danielle, Nicole, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole gallicchio-elz, COO. This podcast has been sponsored by Virtual Assist USA. If you'd like to know more about the hosts or exploring virtual assistant services, visit virtualassistusa.com for more information.